Hallelujah. Let Lord Jesus Christ shine forth. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are joining us. Welcome to another live stream with DCCI to look at the topic of what happened after the death of Muhammad. So we will be looking at Mr. Abu Bakr, Mr. Umar, and Mr. Uthman and how they use their sword to make sure people hear about Islam or make sure people are without head. And to do that, I do have Robert Spencer with me, author of the Quran. Peace of Christ be with you, brother. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Good to
Are
see
you
you.
okay?
Yes, very well. Very well. Thank God. Let us begin. That was a good song there. I hadn't seen that one, the first one.
Okay. Yeah, we've got nearly 20 different songs on Muhammad. So
Yes.
we come
Excellent.
together and then play them.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
um, sorry. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So we are. Oh, we are. I wanted to talk about how did Islam spread after the death of Muhammad. Last time when we met, we looked at Muhammad's relationship with people of book and how he kind of dealt with them, and today's how Muslim deal with the people of the book, or what is the Islamic teachings on that. And then I just thought it will be kind of as a follow-up session. Okay, Muhammad died, got killed. So what happened after Muhammad? Kind of look at that first three caliphs and how did they spread Islam. So that's what I had in mind. What have
Fine.
you got for us?
These first three caliphs are the Khalifa Rashidun, along with Ali the fourth. That is the rightly guided caliphs. This is the golden age of Islam from 632 to 661. And this is, in other words, supposed to be the best period in Islam and a kind of a pattern for all that comes after. And so it's a very important time in Islamic history. The beginning of it is when Muhammad died and nobody was really sure what to do next. And then Abu Bakr gave a very inspiring speech in which he said, whoever worshipped Muhammad, then Muhammad is dead. But whoever worshipped Allah, then Allah is alive and shall never die. However,
You're not telling me people bought that speech and then they choose Abu Bakr as a caliph.
they did. They loved it. Ali was supposed to be the caliph. He was actually chosen by Muhammad to succeed him, according to hadith that are recorded in the Sunni collections as well as the Shia collections. Muhammad chose Ali as his successor, Ali ibn Abi Talib, but the Sunnis explain this away and deny that it means that Ali was supposed to be the successor because he was passed over at the instigation of Aisha, who hated him, and Abu Bakr was chosen. And so Abu Bakr immediately faced the ridda, the apostasy, the departure from Islam of large sections of Arabia. Muhammad had, according to Islamic tradition, united Arabia, and now it was disunited again because once he was dead, many of the Arabs thought, well, now we are free of Islam. Now there will be no more Islam because there's no more prophet. And so this inspiring speech that Abu Bakr gave, it rallied the people and they all returned to Islam and everything was wonderful. Of course, there was a war involved. There was force involved.
Can I just ask a quick question?
Of course.
So you expressed from Abu Bakr to Ali is the golden age of Islam, golden time of Islam. is that the time, like I meet with Muslims and then they say they want to go back to golden age of Islam. Is that the time Muslims want to go from Abu Bakr to Ali?
Yeah, generally that's it.
Okay.
Sometimes when Muslims say they want to go back to the golden age of Islam, they mean Al-Andalus, Islamic Spain, that comes a little later. But usually it's the period of the rightly guided caliphs, which is this
Okay.
wonderful time here. It's wars, it's bloodshed, it's jockeying for power, assassinations, murder. It's got it all.
Okay, so it's very colorful, and that color is usually red.
Yes.
Um, so you just told us that this inspiring speech Abu Bakr made. So he's saying Muhammad is dead, but Allah will never die, and then people kind of again unites. Then why there is a war?
Because it obviously was a failed speech, and nobody wants to nobody really wants to confront that fact, because Abu Bakr is the first successor of Muhammad and the first of the rightly guided caliphs, and so nobody really wants to acknowledge it, and you'll never see this in the Islamic sources, but obviously it was a failed speech, because if it had been a successful speech, there would have been no wars of apostasy. But as I noted before, there was widespread apostasy after Muhammad died, and then Abu Bakr gathered troops and forced the Arabian tribes back into Islam. He would not have had to do that if his speech had been successful. So clearly, even though today it is revered as an example of eloquence, of persuasive power, and of the manifest truth of Islam, at the time, nobody was impressed.
So you expressed that people left Islam after death of Muhammad, and Abu Bakr kind of dealt with them with the color of red in this occasion. So how come Arabs or people who were living under the Islam, they couldn't understand actually Islam won't die when Muhammad died? So why Islam wasn't that, like, why the instruction wasn't clear for people to stay in Islam instead of leave Islam and get killed by Abu Bakr and his team?
That's a very good, important question. Why didn't they immediately understand that Islam will continue even if Muhammad has died? Because Islam is all about Muhammad. Islam is centered on Muhammad, and clearly Muhammad is what it's all about, not Allah. And Muhammad is its central figure, not Allah. And so when Muhammad died, it was entirely understandable that the people of Arabia would think the religion is over, because the focus of our religion, the center of our religion, is gone. Because in the Islamic traditions, Muhammad is portrayed as being what Allah is most concerned about. And if it's really all about the worship of Allah, then it's very strange. For example, you have in chapter 2 of the Quran, the change of the Qibla, discussed in verses in 142, 143, 144, around there. And the change is made, according to the Quran, from one Qibla that I don't believe is mentioned, is it? But it's
It's not
understood to be,
mentioned.
that's right. But it's understood to be that they were praying toward Jerusalem in Islamic tradition, and then they switched to Mecca. So the change of the Qibla is introduced right there in the Quran as being something that will please the messenger. Now, why does the creator of the universe, the creator of the stars and the planets and the galaxies, the creator of every human being and every animal on earth and every plant, he's only concerned about this one individual and making him happy by changing the direction of prayer? And that's not at all the only indication of how central Muhammad is to Islam. Take, for example, also chapter 66, where you have Allah warning two of the wives. According to the hadith It's Hafsa and Aisha. And Hafsa and Aisha are warned that Muhammad doesn't have to keep his promises to them, not specified in the Quran. In one story, it's about that he slept with Maria the Copt instead of sleeping with them in the order that had been established. And in the other story, it's about honey and how he snuck away to eat honey after he said he wouldn't. And the but the point is in the Quran that Allah says that Muhammad is not bound, or the messenger is not bound by his promises to them, and that if they don't toe the line, if they don't obey him, then Allah will divorce them from him and give him new wives who are better. And so here again, you have the master of the universe, the creator of everything, and he's concerned primarily with the happiness of this one individual. The
Well,
marriage to Zainab is another example. There's so many. We could go on and on.
well, I'm sure with your engagement with Muslims and your readings of Islam, even though you are out of the Quran, you already put together how wonderful Muhammad was. Without Muhammad, Allah wouldn't be Allah. So that what makes Allah is Muhammad,
That's
Muhammad, and by default, he is obligated to please Muhammad.
yes.
So you talked about how Muhammad died. Now Abu Bakr, who is taking over, is dealing with people who left Islam.
Yeah.
And like throughout Islamic tradition, we read the wars called apostasy wars. Um, so did Abu Bakr not, since he's like soon after coming after Muhammad, did he not sit down with those people who are living Islam and reason with them? He just went to attack. How that's like, why that happened at the first place?
Well, they did actually have a meeting. The tribes of Arabia who were rebelling, they explained that their pledge was allegiance to Muhammad, and so Muhammad was dead. They were free from their pledge, and Abu Bakr said that they had not pledged allegiance to Muhammad as a person. They had pledged allegiance to the Prophet, and the prophecy still continued. The religion that the Prophet had created still continued, and consequently, they were still under obligation to Islam. Now, here again, they did not buy this. They were not convinced by this, and so that's when the war started. He sent Khalid ibn Walid, his great commander, the great commander of the early armies, and they fought against these rebellious Arabs.
So did Abu Bakr spend all of his 2 years of reigning just like getting rid of the apostates, or he was like useful for something else?
It was getting rid of the Ridda time. All he did was get rid of the apostates, fought against the apostates, and also he did conquer some of the surrounding areas. The conquests began during the time of Abu Bakr. You had the conquest of Iraq that took place during the time of Abu Bakr, and also let's see. That was about it. Then he died. He died only after 2 years.
He didn't get killed. He died because he was like old stuff, or
Let's see. Where is it? He fell ill.
okay.
The Tabari says, I'm working from my own book, The History of Jihad.
Yeah.
This is the only history of jihad there is. Get yours now. And I confess to you, I have not looked at this since I wrote this book. So some of it I don't remember.
That's okay. I can move on to the next question.
No, it's all right. I have it right here. Tabari says that the Jews killed him. The Jews, of course, are always the villains of the piece. I think people would be shocked if they read the stories of the histories of Tabari, who is the historian of early Islam. He's 9th century. The historical value of his accounts is very little, but he's the primary source for a great deal of what we know about what Muslims believe about early Islam, I should say, not what really happened. But in any case, he's got a multi-volume history. It's fascinating. I highly recommend it. And the Jews are always the villains. They're always causing trouble. Just like in the Hadith, you have Muhammad. People should read those as well, and they'll see the Jews, the anti-Semitism is astonishing, and the Jews are always the villains of the piece. So in this case, Abu Bakr is poisoned and dies, and it's attributed to the Jews poisoning him.
That seems very similar to what happened to Muhammad.
Yeah, and probably it's the same thing. Probably there was some figure about whom this was said, and then because Abu Bakr is portrayed as the successor of Muhammad, he's given some of Muhammad's attributes, and that is one of them, that the Jews hate him as well, and they killed him as well. And so it reinforces not only the anti-Semitism, but also Abu Bakr's identification with Muhammad.
Yeah. So he was caliph for 2 years, got rid of the people who walked away from Islam,
Yes,
and conquered some lands, and then he got killed or he died. He's gone. Did he appointed next person to be caliph, or there was like, how did the next person stepped in?
well, he appointed Umar, and so once again, the party of Ali, Shia Ali, the Shia, as they later came to be known, Abu Bakr appointed Umar, but there was a group that thought that once again, the caliphate should have gone to Ali as the rightful successor of Muhammad. But once again, Ali was passed over. And once again, this had to do with Aisha, because I believe, did we discuss it last time, that Aisha hated Ali and prevented him from succeeding Muhammad? Or was that on a different...
We touched it, but we didn't discuss fully.
Okay. Well, anyway, Aisha hated Ali because when she was accused of adultery, Ali told Muhammad, "You can get another wife. What's the big deal? Let her be stoned to death. Who cares?" And so Aisha always hated him and prevented him from becoming caliph 3 times, at the time of Abu Bakr, Umar, and Uthman. And then when he became caliph, she fought against him and got the first fitna going, got Muawiyah to fight against him.
Okay, so in the time of, so when Abu Bakr died, Umar became caliph. Aisha was like only 20 or something. How come she had that much power to like not let Ali to be leader?
She was the al-Mu'minin. She was the mother of the believers.
Without any children.
Right.
Okay. Okay.
And so she was very highly respected as the favorite wife of Muhammad. And so even though she couldn't even speak to the people and always was covered, she was very highly respected as being Muhammad's wife.
Okay. So I'm from Turkey. In Turkey, when people talk about Umar, they call Umar Bloody Umar. Is that because like he was like really, really full of violence, or it's just like people are just Jews are just like accusing him?
Yes, that's why he was very bloody. Umar was caliph for 10 years, and during that period, you have a great expansion of the Islamic territories because he oversaw the conquest of Persia, which was one of the great powers of the day and was an earth-shaking thing, really, that the Muslims or the Arabs were able to conquer Persia, because it would be like it would be like Iran conquering the United States, something like that today, that you have a much greater power, a much more powerful military force, and yet they were defeated. And so this reinforced the Islamic idea that its piety It's obedience to a law that gives victory, not military strength. And this leads to all kinds of fanaticism throughout history, but also to phenomena like 9/11, that Osama bin Laden and the others plotted the 9/11 attacks because they assumed that Allah would give them victory over the United States because they were believers, they were pious. And in a certain sense, there are many Muslims today who believe that that did happen, and that victory was granted because 3,000 people were killed. The United States has been substantially weakened, and it's all because of these 19 hijackers. But anyway, back in Umar's day, they take Persia, it's very bloody. They take Jerusalem, very bloody. They take Egypt, very bloody again. And it's noteworthy that there are several, well, there's a whole lot that can be said about this, but one thing that leaps out at me is that there are a lot of stories that circulate to this day about how magnanimous, how tolerant Umar was, and that he went to Jerusalem, and when he conquered Jerusalem, Sophronius, the patriarch of Jerusalem, the Christian leader of the city, met him at the gates of Jerusalem and showed him around the city. And Sophronius took him to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, the church that encloses the tomb of Christ from which he rose from the dead, and invited him to go in and pray. And Umar magnanimously said, I will not go in and pray there, because if I do, my followers will want to turn it into a mosque, and I want to leave it for you Christians. See how wonderful he was? Now, what's interesting about that is that that's a 9th century story, once again, 200 years after the events. The Patriarch of Jerusalem that it's speaking of, however, Sophronius, left us some of his own writings from the 7th century. And it's noteworthy that he speaks about the brutality of the invaders, how bloody they were, how they destroyed churches, how they killed Christians, how people thought that it was the divine judgment. And he never mentions Umar. If he ever met Umar, he doesn't mention his name. And so it's very likely there was no Umar at all in real life. The Arabs did invade, they did conquer, but all these stories about this magnanimous caliph are fictions from much later.
So, is it correct that when Umar conquered Persia, Iran, like Muslims welcomed him? Not Muslims, Iranians welcomed him.
No, it's not true. And it's interesting also that those same stories were told about when they conquered Egypt around the same time. It seems as if you can find historians saying about everywhere Muslims conquered that they were welcomed. And the idea is that the Persians and the Romans were taxing the people at such high rates, and the Arabs were so much more magnanimous and kind that they I'm sorry, I think I might have to take a call. Could I
Okay.
get back to you in a minute? I'm sorry, but it seems
Yeah,
like
that's fine. That's
I'm
fine.
sorry for the trouble. I'll come
That
back if I
okay,
can
that's fine.
soon.
Okay, that's fine. So we said kind of short. We are taking short break from Robert Spencer. Until Robert Spencer comes back, what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna play a short clip, which I will have to play it again when Robert Spencer comes back. Oh, actually, I'll wait until he comes back. I'll play you new music. I'll play you another song. Let me play this song until Robert Spencer comes back.
Listen, children, to a story that was written long ago about a warlord.
Oh, We are stopping because Robert Spencer is already back.
I'm here. Thank you. Sorry for the trouble. Everything is okay. One never
Okay.
knows. But anyway, I was saying that a lot of modern day historians, because Islam, the Islamic groups, people don't even realize this is going on, but they whitewash history and have tried to cover the tracks of how brutal the Islamic conquests were. You have to go back to the original sources, which I did in the history of jihad, to see how brutal the conquests were. Modern day historians, a lot of times, don't even know because they don't go back to the original sources. And there's so many lies about these things that they say that the taxes, as I was saying, were so high in Persia and Egypt that the invaders were welcomed as liberators.
Wow.
But what's actually the case is very different. And I'm looking for some information from Persia. Yes.
Why?
Yes. Sorry.
While you are looking at that, I'm gonna play very short clip from Adnan Rashid. He's Muslim missionary of Speaker's Corner. There is very like a minute long clip where he's talking about how Persia welcomed Muslims. What happened when Muslims come to Persia? That will give you enough time to kind of.
I have it.
Oh, you have it? Okay.
But I'd love to see
taunted this companion of Prophet Muhammad called Rabi' as to why these downtrodden desert Arabs have come to the civilized land of Persia. Rabi' responded by saying, Allah has sent us and brought us here so that we may free those who desire from servitude to earthly rulers and make them servants of God, that we may change their poverty into wealth and free them from tyranny of false religions and bring them to the justice of Islam. So in other words, Rabi', his view was that we are here to bring the justice of Islam to your people. While your people are living under tyranny and you are forcing them to worship false deities and false gods, let them see the justice of Islam so that they can accept it. And because these political powers were an obstacle, because they had everything to lose, they had their power to lose, they had their tyranny to lose, they had their privileges to lose. So the Muslim generals and Muslim companions of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, they were responding to questions in this way, that we are here to bring justice.
So that was Adnan Rashid, apparently Persian Empire, who was like very well civilized, and I think it was the Persians who kind of give the first one of the first human rights to people, go and worship what you believe. In the time of Nehemiah, apparently by the 7th century, that kind of something happened to that rights and beliefs. Islam went to liberate people.
Yes, well, in Persia, the Arabs kept defeating the Persians, and the Persians were quite surprised by this because they were a far superior force, but they had been exhausted by decades of war against the Romans. The Romans were likewise weakened by that, and this is one reason why the Arabs were able to conquer so much of the Roman Empire and to destroy entirely the Persian Empire. But in any case, the real story behind what Adnan Rashid is saying, we come to bring you wealth. He says that Khalid ibn al-Walid, who I mentioned earlier, who had fought the wars of apostasy and brought the Arabs back to Islam for Abu Bakr, he conquered Persia. And he said, Umar told Khalid, summon the people to Allah. Those who respond to your call, accept it from them. But those who refuse must pay the jizya out of humiliation and lowliness. If they refuse this, it is the sword without leniency. Fear Allah with regard to what you've been entrusted. So the real story of the conquest of Persia is that they were very clearly given the choice: convert to Islam, submit to the Muslims and pay the jizya, or there's war. And they fought, but they lost. And so they submitted and largely converted to Islam, because the submission involves so much degradation, poverty, humiliation, and disgrace that over time, most of them converted to Islam. The same thing in Egypt. And so people think that the Persians and the Egyptians converted to Islam because of the wonderfulness of Islam. There's no evidence for that at all. You go back to the sources and they're talking about paying the jizya and how it's a sign of humiliation and disgrace. And so most people converted in order to escape that humiliation and disgrace.
So Adnan Rashid simply saying like, well, when Muslims entered Persia, Persians put roses and flowers and carpets under their feet to, oh, come and give us freedom. But you are saying actually no, that goes against history.
Yeah.
That goes against history. Such a shame that Dawa gangs are lying.
Oh,
There
they're
is a-
lying. And not only that, but most people in the West have no idea that they're lying.
Yeah.
And they don't know the history, so they're completely susceptible to their appeal. And somebody like Adnan Rashid is very dangerous because he lies, and he is in a position where even non-Muslims will believe him first before they would believe somebody like me, because he is a Muslim, and we are told now that this is somebody that must be respected, whereas an Islamophobe, a critic of Islam, is just an Islamophobe to be dismissed. But the history of jihad is based on the real sources, and so
Yeah.
I would challenge Adnan Rashid or anybody to refute it.
Well, from now on, we can introduce you as the author of the Quran. That might help people to listen what history tells
Okay.
about Islam. There is a question on death of Abu Bakr. So, did Abu Bakr got killed before or after marrying daughter of Muhammad?
Well, I don't think he could marry her after he got killed.
Okay, I'll rephrase my question. Did Abu Bakr married the daughter of Muhammad before he got killed?
Did Abu Bakr? Which daughter of Muhammad? Let's see. It's not Fatima, because Ali married Fatima.
There is a tradition where Abu Bakr wants to marry, but Muhammad didn't give his daughter to Abu Bakr.
Yeah, I don't know. Actually, you got me there. I'm stumped.
Okay,
You have stumped
then
me.
let's move on. The person who asked the question, just drop me email. We will respond to that.
Yeah, I'll have to look.
Okay, so Umar conquered Persia, Jerusalem, and Egypt, and so Umar was like pretty bloody caliph.
Yes.
Did he die from old age, or how did he die?
How did Umar die? I believe I have that in here. Let's see. Yes, Feyruz al-Nihawandi, who was a Christian slave who had been captured by the Muslims during the conquest of Persia. That must be, yeah. I don't know for sure that he married one of Fatima's daughters, but I don't remember him marrying a daughter of Muhammad. But anyway, I'd have to check. Anyway, this Christian slave stabbed Umar. Now, why would a Christian be so angry with Umar as to kill him? Maybe it had to do with how the Christians were being treated by the Muslims, quite in opposition to what is claimed nowadays about how wonderful the treatment was and how everybody was flocking to Islam because of its manifest truth and the tolerance and magnanimity of the Muslim rulers. The Caliph Umar was killed because of his brutality, and so that brutality should be recognized.
So Umar is also someone who contributed into the Quran. Like there are three verses in the Quran. First, Umar gets the idea, and then Muhammad approaches Allah, and then Allah reveals the verses. I'm surprised, like he's not the first one who become caliph. He was the second one.
Yeah, it's a little bit. Abu Bakr is it's kind of a strange choice, although it may have been because of his absolute fanaticism. That Abu Bakr says, that's another famous quote of Abu Bakr, that he said while Muhammad was alive according to Islamic tradition, if he says it, it is true. It's because of the story about the Miraj, the trip to Jerusalem, where Muhammad spoke to the prophets and went in and spoke to Allah and bargained him down from 25 prayers a day, 50 prayers a day, was it, to 5 prayers a day. And somebody said to Abu Bakr, "You actually believe that he traveled to Jerusalem on a winged white horse with a human head and spoke to Allah?" And Abu Bakr says, "If he says so, then it is true." And what is so surprising in that? He tells me that communications from Allah, from heaven to earth, come to him in any hour of a day or night, and I believe him. And that is more extraordinary than that boggles your mind. So it may be because of his fanatical devotion that he was chosen.
Yeah, so there was also a deal of that child as well. So Abu Bakr got killed, Umar got killed, and how did Uthman end up on the list?
Uthman was chosen, let's see, because he had the support of the partisans of Umar, and Ali was yet again passed over. Now, this was kind of interesting because Uthman was famous for cowardice. And Ali's supporters said that he had run away during some of the early battles that the Muslims fought, like a donkey runs from a lion. And so they didn't want to make him caliph. But Uthman didn't even deny these stories. So he was a coward. But he says that he had permission to leave the battle because he had been excused from the Battle of Uhud by Muhammad himself because his wife was sick. Oh. And he had also been on assignment from Muhammad at another time when the Battle of Badr was going on. And so Uthman was known to run from battles, and yet he was chosen primarily because he wasn't Ali. And that was the only other candidate. Ali was not going to get it because Aisha was not in his corner. And Aisha was still a very powerful force. So Uthman becomes caliph. The conquests continue. And now we have, for the first time, the Muslims making incursions into European areas, a naval expedition for the very first time to Cyprus in 649. They also went to Rhodes, the island of Rhodes, destroyed the Colossus. Oh, no, sorry. The Colossus had already been destroyed. I don't want to blame them for everything. I just see it mentioned here. Excuse me. And the conquest then continued of the Roman lands of Syria and elsewhere in leading up to the conquest of, not the conquest, the first siege of Constantinople, which took place a little bit later after Uthman in 675. Uthman died in 654.
Okay, 654.
656, excuse me. Sorry, working from memory. 656. 653, he's famous for collecting the Quran, although this never happened. But that's the story. The traditional Islamic story is that Uthman in 653 gathered all the people who had memorized portions of the Quran or written down portions and collected it together, burned the variants, distributed the Quran to the provinces. We know this did not happen because there still was no mention of the Quran anywhere. You would think if you had the book by then, people would start quoting it. Nobody quotes it for another 40 years. So most likely it did not exist at this time.
If you go with the tradition, like that 652 he collected the Quran. So how come Caliph, I don't know, today, like a couple of weeks ago, we had 4 students are being expelled from the school simply dropping the Quran on the floor, and one of them is like 14 years old autistic child, and now he's like in hiding place. Today it's like very big deal, hurting the feelings of the Quran as well as hurting the copy of the Quran. And you are telling me, according to tradition, Caliph of Islam was able to order the burning of the Quran? Did I get that correct?
That's the story, and that's the still the way that old Qurans are supposed to be disposed of. The problem is if somebody like Rasmus Paludan nowadays burns a Quran, that's an insult because he's not a Muslim, and he's doing it because he's protesting against jihad violence. But if a Muslim burns a Quran, that's a pious act because he is doing what is ordered to do for a copy of the book that is no longer usable.
Okay. And some Muslims are doing very nasty things to Quran as well. But anyway, so Uthman is the first one who kind of physically harmed the Quran.
Yes, that's right.
Okay. So you talked about how Uthman reached Europe. He reached Azerbaijan.
Yes.
He collected the Quran. It seems he was like very good guy, and he did lots of good things for Muslim community. How did he die?
How did Uthman die? Yeah.
I love that story.
What's that?
I love that story.
Let me see. I hope I can do it justice here.
Oh.
I only vaguely remember it. I have to confess right now, but I do believe it's in the book here. So just bear with me for a moment.
That's okay.
He was assassinated in 656 by some Muslims who had rebelled against his rule. His detractors had accused him of bid'ah, innovation, for changing some of the practices to which the Muslims had become accustomed. This was a very serious offense. It's still a very serious offense in Islam. A lot of people nowadays, they speak about reform in Islam as if it's as easy as changing your jacket. Reform in Islam is always going to be bid'ah, innovation. It's not something that's allowed. It's a very great sin. And so Allah says in the Quran, "This day I have perfected your religion for you," chapter 5, verse 3. That's not something that allows for innovation. If it's perfect, why change it? You're only going to make it imperfect. So anyway, Uthman wrote to Muawiyah, who was one of the generals and who ultimately became caliph, the first non-rightly guided caliph in 661. He wrote to Muawiyah and he equated obedience to himself with obedience to Islam. But they did not buy this, and Uthman was killed. So finally, Ali became the caliph. But there may be more about the assassination of Uthman that you can tell us.
So I thought he got killed by son of Abu Bakir, and then when they killed him, they played football with the Quran. They kicked the Quran around, and then when they beheaded him, which we don't have it, but there is this famous thing: his blood went into the Quran, and then there is Quran in Istanbul or in Samarkand has the blood of Uthman in it, because you know about that.
I don't have that story in the book. I have to revise the book.
Oh, yeah, that's what they say. Like, they killed him, and even like his body, they didn't bury his body for like a couple of days. It smelled, and then they buried him in the place of kafirs. And as they were carrying his body, his head was like hitting the doors stuff.
They loved him clearly.
Yeah, he did good thing for Muslims, but he got killed. And
yes.
Ali took over from 656.
Yes. And this was the time of the first fitna. Fitna is disturbance, essentially civil war, because the partisans of Aisha did not accept Ali as the caliph, and Ali went to, Aisha went to Muawiyah, the same general to whom Uthman had appealed, and said, "You have to fight against Ali and supplant him because he can't be the caliph." Now, there's an interesting story at this time in Islamic tradition of the forces of Ali and the forces of Muawiyah, and they meet in battle, and they fix the Quran to their bayonets, and they hold up the Quran, and both sides have the Quran up. Now, this doesn't make any sense because in the first place, they wouldn't have had that many copies of the Quran because every copy of the Quran had to be written out by hand. So there were only a few copies of the Quran. Soldiers, if they had one, were not going to carry it out onto the battlefield where it could be dropped, it could be desecrated, it could be covered with mud or blood or whatever, destroyed in some way. And so the story is obviously false. But here again, this is another story out of Islamic tradition that is told as if it were true, and nobody even thinks through the fact that it's not only it's impossible, not just false, that they would have even behaved in that way, and that there would have been enough copies if they had wanted to carry them out onto the battlefield.
I thought in Islamic tradition, Ali had a Quran which was 17,000 verses, versus Uthman's Quran was around 6,000 something, like if you go with according to tradition. So, do you think Ali's followers were carrying that 17,000 verses of the Quran in one side, and then this side 6,000? The one is the correct Quran will win the battle, I guess.
Yeah, well, that's not in the story at all. You know, the story does not admit of different variants, but there's no doubt there are many, many stories throughout Islamic history of the Shia, which remembers Shi'at Ali, the party of Ali, having other verses of the Quran, other surahs, chapters of the Quran that the Sunnis don't have. And I even put two of the Shiite surahs in the critical Quran at the back because I wanted people to know that these kinds of things exist. And there are many, many other variants of this kind that indicate that there was no one Quran text. There were many, many different Quranic texts.
So in that case, since Muhammad never saw the written version of the Quran in his lifetime, as the author of the Quran, you wanted to make sure what has been mentioned, it is in the Quran. So you did better job than early Muslims. So thank you for that.
Oh, happy to help.
So Ali, so commanders of the believers versus mother of the believers are fighting with one another.
Yes.
Who is the winner?
Ali was the winner, and then he was magnanimous and didn't kill Aisha. And he might have regretted that later because he himself was killed and supplanted by Muawiyah, who he had fought. And so his victory was hollow.
So what was the reason he didn't kill Aisha?
He was being a good guy, but probably more likely, the stories are that he was being a good guy. He was being kind to the mother of the believers, but more likely he had an awareness of the fact that she was the leader of, the effective leader of a large group that he wanted to win over. And so he might have thought that leaving her alive would be more effective to win them over than killing her. It might have been, however, that he miscalculated in that generally, even to this day, the warriors of jihad understand the world in terms of strength and weakness only. And so they saw that he was not going to kill Aisha. They interpreted that as weakness and only had contempt for Ali instead of respect.
After 656, Ali and Aisha, two Muslim group, are fighting with one another. Ali is the winner, let Aisha go free, and then Ali gets killed.
661. 661. Ali is, where is it?
So you told in the beginning of the live stream, this is the golden age of Islam.
Yes.
But last 54 minutes.
Oh, the Khawarij killed Ali. I had forgotten. The Khawarij are a group that they rejected both Ali and Muawiyah, both the Sunnis, or what became the Sunnis and the Shia. They only wanted a caliph who was sinless. So they must still be looking. They were angry with both of them for fighting against one another, so they just fought against both of them.
So
anyway,
they wanted to clean the floor.
Yeah, they wanted the pure Islam that would come from somebody who was not a sinner, and these people were sinning by fighting against each other.
Okay.
In their view.
So, very peaceful, very peaceful. So, golden age of Islam seems to me, maybe I understood wrongly, but what I'm hearing from you is it's all bloody death, hate, and war, and more war.
That's all it is.
Caliphs are killing one another, or Muslims are killing the caliphs. So Muslims are just fighting with one another, and when they are not fighting with one another, they are fighting with non-Muslims and conquering their land. Doesn't look like the lifestyle we want to have or century we want to live. I'm just confused. Why would Muslims want to go to that bloody decades?
Oh, well, look, if you believe it, then Allah wants you to fight. That's what he wants you to do on earth. He wants you to fight and spill blood. Why does Allah want you to do that? They don't think about that. In Christianity, there's a great deal of energy expended by theologians on the questions of why does God command this or that? This is not a question in Islam. In Islam, there's just fiat. That is, Allah commands it, that's it. There's nothing else. So if Allah commanded it, then it must be good. If Allah says to kill them wherever you find them, kill them wherever you find them, and Allah will be happy. And you will soothe your own heart, as the Quran says in chapter 9, verse 14 and 15, by fighting, by killing the unbelievers and executing the wrath of Allah upon them. So, as a consequence of that, they don't think that it's a rebuke. They don't think that it's some sort of a bad reflection on Islam, that the rightly guided caliphate, the period of the rightly guided caliphs, is so bloody, because that's what Allah wills. Allah decided to create a world and where half the people have to shed the blood of the other half. Why? It doesn't matter. He did.
It's just very bloodthirsty.
Well, yeah, it testifies to the fact that we're dealing here with a demon and not God. That we are dealing with the Lord of death, of evil, of hatred, of dissolution, not the Creator, because the Creator creates, and it is life, fecundity, multiplication, abundance. It's the author of hatred and death and evil that wants to kill and destroy. And so that's very clearly what Islam is all about. It's all about the exaltation of the evil impulse and of evil in the world. But if you're in it, it's very hard to realize that.
So, even though from Christian perspective, I am seeing so-called golden age of Islam, fourth caliph, time of the first four caliph. I'm seeing that time as bloody and dangerous but overall that is the time Muslims are faithfully acting what Allah is ordering them and what Muhammad ordered them in Islamic teachings.
Yes. So that's why it's the period of the rightly guided caliphs. Maybe the period starting with Muawiyah, the Umayyad Caliphate, is not rightly guided because they weren't always pursuing endless warfare and bloodshed. Although they were to a tremendous degree. Still, not quite as a thoroughgoing manner.
Okay. What is the thing Christians can do? What are the things Christians can do to open the eyes of Muslims, first of all, to real history, not the history which was put forward by Adnan Rashid. Also, open the eyes of Muslims to see actually Allah is not life giver, but He's the life taker. What are the practical things do you think Christians can do at Muslims in this area?
Well, in the first place, the real history is in the history of jihad. That's why I wrote the book, to try to provide that need, because nobody knows this history. People are not aware of these things. And so if you don't want to quote the terrible, evil Spencer, then go to the notes and quote the sources that I use. It's all documented. And so there's no problem in that. And the more you give the information to Muslims, the more you might open up the fact that the real God created all of us, and everybody has a sense that they love life and they don't love death, even though the Muslims like to avow that they love death. It's contrary to human nature. And so the more that you emphasize how the Christian God is really a God of life and the life giver and the creator and so on, and that the God of Islam glories in death and destruction, then you will touch something in their hearts if they haven't got it entirely obscured, because everybody has that. Everybody has the love for life initially.
Well, as you are speaking, it just reminds me Moses's last sermon, like choose blessing instead of choose cursing. You will be cursed stuff. Well, we pray that Lord will draw Muslims to Himself. And those of you who haven't read the book on the From Muhammad to ISIS, History of Islam, please get it and read it. Just you don't need to check the historical footnote references as footnotes. You can simply say this is put together by the author of the Quran. I am sure it will get a lot of respect from Muslims. And thank you very much for joining me tonight, Robert Spencer. It's been a privilege to have you. We learned quite a lot from you. I think I will re-listen the live stream to make sure I take all the notes because I learned lots of things which I didn't know. So really appreciate.
Thank you very much.
Thank you everyone who joined us in the chat. By God's grace, we will see you on another live stream. May Christ crucified silence you with His love until we see you.